Just welcoming everybody and saying hello. Welcome to today's webinar called Nail Your Next Presentation in Person or Online with Joseph Spitali, public speaking coach and founder of Nail It. This 1-hour online presentation will take a deep dive into the latest research on how to best present that next pitch online versus in person. As mentioned, today's host is Joseph Spitali. Joseph has captivated audiences speaking at seminars, tourist attractions, weddings, gala fundraisers, and cruise ships for over 20 years. Whether coaching companies in healthcare, education, or hospitality, he provides essential communication tools in fun and interactive ways, as you can see. Joseph has coached public officials and executives for some of Canada's largest companies to speak at community events, fundraising galas, city council meetings, and holiday parties. In 2021, a student of his won the highest Canadian national mark for the Royal Conservatory Speech Arts and Drama examinations. Joseph has even entertained thousands, starring as a main stage singer at Tokyo Disneyland. Joseph is a graduate of the American Musical and Dramatic Academy in New York City and the University of British Columbia in classical singing. Now, just for some quick housekeeping rules for today. Today, we are encouraging webcams on for an extra interactive session. Please note that all of today's attendees have been placed on mute for the duration of the workshop, but that you can ask questions throughout using the chat function in your Zoom dashboard. This workshop will be recorded and the recording link will be sent out after today's session. Now, without further ado, I will hand it over to Joseph to start. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Rupalin. Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. Thanks so much for giving me a wave there. All right, I want to start with a little story. I essentially was gathering some research for today's presentation. I was asking my friends and family about their experience with online presentations versus in-person presentations. And my partner shared with me that one day he'll be online and he'll be presenting for hundreds of people in multiple countries. And then the next day, he'll be in person presenting with his team in person. And then the next day, he'll have that same in-person team meeting, but one of the team members is a little sick, a little under the weather, doesn't feel comfortable coming into work, but is still okay to work. So they're in a hybrid model for that third day. And so this is the nature of today's presentations, and we have to be able to adapt to these types of models. Okay, so I put together some research for you today, and whether you're doing a one-on-one meeting or a large group meeting in any of these types of platforms, online, in-person, or hybrid, I've got some tools for you. And I see the problem really is that the presentation tactics that you may have learned for in-person communication doesn't always work online. So let me break that down for you. Show my screen. Awesome. So today's tools, we're going to be understanding the communication differences. We're going to use body language and gestures for optimal understanding. We're going to build trust through eye contact, appear confident through posture, show you care with facial expressions. I have a fun exercise for that. And deliver your message with speaking techniques. After all, this is public speaking. Okay, so we have to understand the communication differences first between being online or in person. I hate to say it, but nothing is better than face-to-face. Email, phone, video conferencing all try to replicate that face-to-face communication. It really is the best. And video conferencing is second best. There was a study out of the University of Alberta that said that people found that video conferencing helped maintain and build rapport so much better than emails or phone calls. So when we can, we go to video conferencing like we're doing today. Communication is multi-sensory, and video conferencing allows us to give that in-person feel as best as we can. Okay, so what is so great about face-to-face? I think it's important to understand this because we're also choosing whether to have meetings in person or online. And so this might help you decide what to do. It's better for emotional conversations, like getting a team hyped up for a new initiative or delivering some unfortunate news. Difficult conversations, of course, face-to-face is better. We all know that you never break up with someone over a text message or an email. There's a reason for that. So those difficult conversations are always better face-to-face. Okay, anytime you have to give personable recognition, like a celebration, awards, face-to-face is always better. A little tip on this, I really would avoid a hybrid model for any celebrations. It's just awkward for the people that are at home zooming in. I think that if you have some people that can't attend, just have that recognition all online, so everyone's in the same boat there. And it's really good for collaborative decision making. It's just so much easier to take those votes. You also can see people's facial expressions and kind of see where everything's going, just the mood of the room. So it's a little bit easier that way. And it's great to start a new relationship, mostly because you've got so much eye contact there, which is about building trust. And of course, in sales, that's so important to have trust. So this is why so many companies are returning to the office at a major cost even, but there are some cons to face-to-face, and I'm going to go over that right now. There isn't always time. The scheduling conflicts, as we know, some people actually may be like socially uncomfortable. I'm an extrovert. I would perform for thousands of people in Disneyland, but not everyone feels that way. And so it's important to understand that this online environment might be more comfortable for others. Not everyone can attend. We're in a global market right now. And so face-to-face doesn't always work. And in group meetings, not everyone is comfortable with public speaking. It's one of the #1 fears, which is why I'm sure so many of you are joining today. Recently, a Harvard Business Review study said that some people feel more comfortable speaking up in online meetings. So keep that in mind. It's not always better to do that in person. It depends on the person. So what can we do? Let's start with some easy behaviors that we can change right away. People complain that online meetings, they aren't the real meeting. That happens afterwards. Hey, Janice, what did you think of that presentation? It was good. I'm just not really sure it's viable. And I totally agree. Well, if that happens after the meeting, let's make a commitment to keep everyone in the loop. I think it's important, even if this is online or in person, that these kinds of conversations still happen. And communication is there. People complain that online meetings lack that in-person connection, but I say that we shouldn't be afraid of getting personal online, and I have some tips for that a little bit later. Okay, online distractions. Distractions interfere with the communication process, and we want to be eliminating them as much as possible. They do happen, and everyone always complains about these online distractions, but we can eliminate them, both in person and online. So let's start first with online distractions and how we can prevent those. Try not to multitask. If you're in the audience of a Zoom meeting, Try not to look at that second screen. Some people might have 3 different screens going on, and this also causes Zoom fatigue. So try to focus on one thing at a time. You can get to that email a little bit later. And of course, no eating, these types of things can just distract from you receiving these messages. Second one is limit your movement. I actually can see most of you right now, and you guys are actually being fantastic. You're not distracting at all. But of course, if someone just like gets up and leaves, I'm gonna be wondering if they're still in the room listening. I'm gonna be sort of not focused on the delivery of my message there. So as an audience member, please try to limit the movement there. Okay. Even like kind of twisting the chair and whatnot can really kind of be distracting. Set rules for chat as we did. Rupalin, thank you so much. In some company cultures, it's a little bit different. It's in the tech industry, a CEO could be presenting and the chat is going absolutely crazy at the same time. I actually don't recommend this. Clearly we cannot. We think we're much better multitaskers than we really are. I would definitely listen to the message and focus on that, let that sink in, rather than having these side conversations. Minimize any noise. I currently am in fear that my 70-pound Bernedoodle is going to start barking in any moment, but we try the best we can to minimize these things the best we can, all right? Use simple backgrounds. If you have a virtual background that has some sort of a message on it, I mean, these kinds of things just are really distracting. A simple white background is just good enough. Anticipate, thanks Dennis for that background. Your wonderful dog, I love it. Okay. Anticipate tech problems. You might need to, before a presentation, restart your computer like I did today, just to see if there's any Zoom updates or anything that might interfere with my presentation today. And if tech problems happen, it's not necessarily a bad thing. In a small group meeting, helping someone go through those tech problems can build rapport actually, and can help establish a little bit of a fun relationship. Okay, let's move on. Dress professionally. I don't know what it is about online, but a lot of people tend to dress more comfortable at home. Just keep in mind that just try to dress the way that you would in person. What you wear and how much effort you put into your personal appearance really does tell a story of how invested you are in that meeting. So just as a general rule, if you wouldn't show up in person to that meeting wearing that, then it's probably not appropriate for online too. Okay. There are some in-person distractions as well that can happen. And so let's try to minimize those as well. Stay off your phone in a meeting. I know it's, again, easy to look at that email that's coming through, but it's just not really fair to the presenter to be doing that all the time. Some people are running from meeting to meeting to meeting and they're eating in a meeting. It's kind of like you're in a scary movie in the movie theater and it's very, very quiet. The killer's coming from around the corner and then suddenly the person next to you just chomps into a bag of chips or like opens that bag and it's like so loud. It's very distracting. So try your best to avoid that. Again, side conversations can happen in person too. Let's avoid that. One thing that you can do to stop that is just actually look at the people who are talking to each other. Even just looking at them without even saying anything will usually stop that side conversation. If it continues to be a problem, you can ask them if they have something to share or if they have any questions about what you're discussing or what you're talking about, and that usually will stop people from continuing that side conversation. Don't stand in front of a window. This is, I know a lot of people will think, oh, this background, this beautiful light behind me is the best choice. It's actually not. In fact, the light should be on you. So if anything, you would want the backs of the audience to be against the window. So the light actually shines on you and they're not looking at traffic and looking at things that could be happening, like a bird that's behind you, that's very distracting. Or if there's the office behind you, you want to avoid that being behind you. Every time someone walks by in the office, they're going to look at that person walking by and not at your presentation. So pay attention to where you stand. If you can prevent office noise, do so. Yeah. I'm gonna move on. Rehearse to prevent tech problems. And the best solution to this, I think, is just practicing and getting there 10 minutes early, just really making sure that your setup is good. All right, rehearse. We communicate as the sender, like right now, I am the sender of the information, I'm the presenter and the receiver of information in two ways, verbal and nonverbal. So verbally, I am speaking and you guys can hear me, but non-verbally, I'm using hand gestures and facial expressions that you guys can see as well. Of course, there's presentation aids too. So that's great, but I'm also receiving information from you at the same time. I'm not actually hearing things from you all, and that's the difference between an in-person and online, but I am seeing if you're bored, I'm seeing if just little things that will tell me if I should be moving on or not. Okay. The major problem with online presentations is visibility problems. We need to be seeing gestures, mood indicators, facial expressions, and eye contact. That often gets lost. And these are the types of things that make that personable, connected experience that we get in real life. And so essentially, in video chats, we have to work harder to receive and send these signals. I know this is going to be tough for some people, but I'm going to be advocating for everyone's camera being on during online and hybrid meetings. I'm not saying right now I'm calling on everyone to turn their cameras on, because I do understand that it's just best to let people know in advance of a meeting if the meeting is going to be cameras on or not. I really recommend that you do that. But I also recommend that you always choose the cameras on option, especially for hybrid meetings too. When given the choice, people will almost always choose to have their camera off. But it's not what's best for us. So we want to be having great communication skills and be able to get that information. So let's just do what is best for the presentation. And encouraging people to have their cameras on, especially when we're building those new relationships, contract negotiations, difficult conversations, all those things that I say that's really good with in-person meetings or presentations. Let's have the cameras on for that. But of course, company culture really it's different for this. I know a couple of my family members were having dinner together and they were talking about in the engineering field, no one has their cameras on ever, like any meeting whatsoever. It's just not part of their company culture. I can only imagine, and research supports this, how many millions of dollars are being lost because of miscommunications, just because of facial expressions not being seen, or gestures that could have helped explain things a little bit better. So we want to be fighting against that. Again, some people are a little maybe apprehensive about their home environment, but of course a black or a white wall in the background is just suffice. So don't worry so much about that. All right, another thing is if you have some people that have their cameras on and some people that don't have their cameras on, it really actually spotlights the people who do have their cameras on. So it's not necessarily fair for those people to be, in the spotlight all the time. So do a favor and throw that camera on if you can. Of course, I didn't let you know in advance today. So in the future. All right, a little tip. Try to hide your own self view. It's so easy in online presentations to watch yourself, but that's actually very distracting for you. I really recommend, and it causes Zoom fatigue as well, because you're just analyzing yourself, and that's not what you should be focusing on. As a public speaker, focus on that message. All right, so that's a little tip there to hide your self view. All right, let me just show you exactly how I set up my camera. I really recommend that you have your head closest to the top in the camera view as possible. And you might want to actually be about 1 meter away from the camera view. This will actually allow you to have better posture, and it will allow you to use gesturing. You can see that if I'm kind of up here, like a lot of people will have their cameras like this. In this case, the camera is facing up. We're not getting that eye contact at eye level, which will have that personal connection. But then also you can't see my hand gestures at all. So I really, really recommend just having yourself centered in that camera view with your head closest to the top. And then your gestures could be a little bit higher as well. Awesome. Let's keep going. Okay. For a hybrid meeting, I have on the left side of the screen here our camera positioning and just a setup that Toastmasters teaches. So you've got an external camera at eye level for a presenter who's actually standing. And if you don't have an external camera, it's fine. You can just use the laptop's camera there. And then there would be a projector behind the presenter that would project the people who are at home or online. But then the presenter doesn't have to look back at the screen to see the people online. They can just look at the laptop to see those people online right in front of them. And then there's another camera that is connected, just joining the Zoom separately through the Zoom app. And this camera is used for the participants in the room. So the people at home don't have a disadvantage. They can actually see those gestures and facial expressions to whoever's talking in a meeting room. So it'd be your job to focus that camera on whoever is speaking in the room, so people at home can see. And then there's a speaker there in the center, as well as a mic in the center, so everyone can easily be heard. I really love the setup to the right. I think that for some presentations, not everyone is going to know to bring their own device, but I really recommend if you know it's going to be a hybrid meeting, ask people to bring their laptops with them. This way you can very easily and quickly share content on the screen that everyone sees. Everyone can see the people that are at home as well. You can take notes on your laptop. It's also a great option as well for a hybrid meeting. So everyone is on their laptop. And then the cameras are on each of those people as well in the meeting room. Perfect. Let's move on to body language. All right. So this is such an essential part of public speaking. 93% of what we communicate is through body language, all right? So when you are presenting, we want to make sure that we see as many hand gestures as possible, as I said earlier, but the size of your audience in person will depend on how big your gesturing is going to be. So if you have like 350 people that you're presenting to in person, just make sure your gestures are really big so the people in the back of the room can see them really, really nicely. Whereas if you're online, it's more appropriate to have more conservative gestures. Less gesturing is more appropriate. And so for small audiences in person and online, smaller gestures would make more sense. Okay. So, but how do we gesture? All right. So gestures with your palms up can show trustworthiness. Yep, thank you so much, Avril, that's fantastic. And of course, we want to build trust. So if you're trying to sell something to someone, palms up would be a great option to deliver that message in person or online. And gestures on stressed words can show confidence. I should preface, we don't want to be doing too much or too little gesturing. You can record yourself and watch the recording, and you can see if it seems like it's too much or not. It's a good recommendation. Everyone is a little different. Some gestures can show empathy. Putting your hands on your heart means, oh, I totally understand what you're going through. It's really hard. And some gestures can fill in the gaps in the listener's understanding. If I'm speaking for people who English is their second language, I'm going to be doing more gesturing for sure, so they understand that message. Okay, and some gestures can help with cueing. In the back of the room, you'll find my book that I am selling. Not actually, but just gesturing to that back of the room is going to be more helpful for people to understand that. Okay, I'm going to get, if you can, if it is within your abilities, I'd like everyone to stand up right now and let's practice some of these gestures. Okay, I'll give you a second here. Try to follow along. If you can't stand up, that is totally okay. But one of the things I want you can stay muted for this, but I want you to repeat after me. All right, we're going to practice some of these gestures. Okay, put your palms up this time, and I want you to say, I think this deal is going to be fantastic. Great, you guys are doing a great job. All right, let's do some confidence gestures. I can't wait to work with you. Fantastic, you guys are doing great. Let's show some empathy. Oh, that sounds really hard. Yeah, fantastic. And let's now fill in the gaps of people's understanding and say, let's say, wow, the venue is going to be huge. Fantastic. And finally, let's cue, in the back of the room, you will see the donation box to our charity. Fantastic, everyone. All right, sit down for me, please. Thanks for that. Let's move on. When you are in the audience, it's important, especially when you are online, to be doing active listening. So when we are in person, we naturally see facial expressions, nods, and we hear things like, yep, I understand, or groans like, ugh. But we don't hear that. Like, I'm not getting that feedback from you, and nor do I want to. It'd be too distracting. So with especially so many people in the room. Instead, I love to see your facial expressions so that I can see if you really do understand. So more of that is needed online. All right, mood behaviors are all communicated as well through videos on and seeing that. Okay, I understand. I was just chatting with my friend who is a recruiter, and he was saying that I hate when I am presenting because I don't get that auditory feedback from people online. I'm thinking to myself, are these people even alive? I've just been like talking to a wall for so long, and I don't even know anything. So you can help people out by helping react more with those facial expressions online. Okay, eye contact. This is so important. Essentially, when we are in person, eye contact establishes connection with people. It builds trust. It holds people accountable. Like I said, those people were having that side conversation over there. Looking at them holds people accountable. It makes people feel heard by just looking them in the eyes, okay? But for video conferencing, this is the problem. A lot of people are looking, like right now, I'm looking at all of you, but it doesn't look like I'm looking at you. Now it looks like I'm looking at you. So what I want you to be doing is looking both at the participants, so you're actually getting that feedback, but also looking at the camera as well. That's so important. And it may feel really weird. It's like I'm just looking at a camera, but it does make the other person feel like they are connected to you. It establishes trust better that way as well. And of course, don't look at yourself. It's we've already talked about that. All right, so I'm going to give you an example of what you should be doing for in-person eye contact. Essentially, what you want to be doing is randomly looking around the room. I've had some of my students just kind of look like the Terminator, scanning left to right, left to right with their eye contact. That's not great. Essentially, you got to think of it as a breath or a phrase or an idea goes to one part of the room or one person in the room. And then you're randomly switching to people in the back, people in the front, side. So just when you're delivering that message in person, try your best to not kind of look around too much. You're going to look a crazy person. But of course, you don't stare for a long time, like 3 or 4 sentences of the same person. That's going to make them feel like they're being put on the spot. So that's for in person. But for online, I have over here my presentation notes. Over here, I am looking at all of you and your beautiful faces. And then I have the camera here. I have my slides down here. There's a lot to be looking at. And most people will not look at that camera, but 50% of what you should be looking at is that camera. And it just takes practice. It's sort of like when you're reading a book, you should be looking up at the audience if you're presenting, reading something, right? You shouldn't be looking down at the page. All right, let's move on to posture. Okay, so essentially, if you are online, we want to be doing a little bit of an exercise right now to make sure that we actually have good posture. One of the things that I see a lot of times is people with their shoulders forward like this, which is not a very open way of receiving information. In fact, actually having your shoulders back and down is way better posture. So I'm gonna have a little exercise for you guys. So what I'd like you to do is put your palms out to the side and actually put your palms up. And then relax your arms down. You'll notice that actually opens that chest up so much better. And of course, our hands are always forward usually when we're on the screen. So try your best to avoid that by having your chest open and your shoulders back and down. You're not holding it back. That's tension. That's unnecessary tension. But essentially, you're just being aware of not hunching forward. A lot of people jet their head forward because they're looking at things on the screen. Try your best to imagine a string pulling you up, and that will help you keep that chin sort of not down, but at that level. All right. So those are like the most common posture things for online that I would work on. I also really think there's a sense of groundedness that sometimes people don't get online as well. So having your feet planted in the ground will give you that sense of security, that sense of groundedness that will help you feel just more confident in general. And so when you are in person though, for posture, if you don't mind, I'd love for you all to stand up once again. And I'm gonna show you guys a little bit, if you can stand up, to show you what you should be doing for your posture. So I'll give you a moment right now to stand up. Awesome. Okay, perfect. For in person, what I recommend is you have your feet shoulder width apart, okay, with your toes facing forward. Try not to lean into a hip, especially for a long presentation. It's so easy for people to sort of stand like this when they're presenting. Avoid that. This is your confidence position, everyone. Try not to lock your knees, so your knees are not locked back, and they're not kind of bent either, but they're just relaxed and not locked. Another thing that I see is people kind of arching the back like this, or slouching forward. Just try to find a neutral position there. And with your shoulders, just like we're seated, we want to have our nice shoulders back. And this is that open presence. I'm open to hearing what you all have to say. It's just a more confident position. All right, when it comes to our head, we want to make sure that we're leading, looking around the room with our eye focus, and we're not just moving our head so much. That can also be distracting too. Anything that you do with your body, like scratch or fix your hair, is going to be a distraction. So try to minimize that as much as possible. Everyone can sit down. Thank you. All right, perfect. Thank you for that, everyone. All right, let's move on to facial expressions. Okay, so facial expressions, as I was saying earlier, are so important for the communication process in video conferencing. But we naturally just do this in real life. So I'm going to be focusing on video conferencing for this, because in real life, we just do these facial expressions. Some people in business minimize their reactions for specific purposes. And so you have to know in your business if it's appropriate to react or not, and that really does depend on what you want to conceal or what you want to show, just like in poker, right? But online, they just become way more crucial. So let's actually they also show mood as well. Let me show you guys what are these things that people conceal. In business settings, people often don't say what they really think. Facial gestures, like facial expressions, often reveal concealed emotions like fear, contempt, disgust, or surprise in boardroom or executive committee meetings. I want to focus in on these 4 facial expressions and just do a little exercise with you all to show that online we can be actually showing these facial expressions. All right, the first thing we're going to do, and I want everyone to follow along with this, is we're going to be practicing our fear expression. So I want everyone to raise your eyebrows, draw them together, and then we want to have the mouth open but slightly tensed. So I want everyone to do this for me. Imagine you get the chance to get the pitch of a lifetime with a new client, but you don't have time to prepare. Everyone show me fear in 3, 2, 1. Ooh, yes, that's amazing. Good job. All right, let's show some contempt. All right, one side of the mouth is slightly raised. All right, and then your eyes are kind of squinting, like, what is that? All right, imagine another company stole your marketing idea. Show me contempt in 3, 2, 1. Yeah. Charlotte, that was amazing. Thank you. All right, let's look at disgust. All right, that's when we kind of are scrunching everything to the center. Imagine like tasting a bad apple. Ooh, right? Everything is wrinkled to the center there. All right, you're communicating to the person that you really don't like this idea. Okay, imagine you just heard a distasteful, awful idea that was just pitched. Show me disgust in 3, 2, 1. Ooh, ooh, not good. And finally, surprise. I love this one. Everything is open. You've got your eyebrows raised. You've got wrinkles in your forehead if you don't have Botox. You've got your eyes popping, okay? Your jaw drops. Everyone imagine you just found out your client's campaign was a huge success. Show me surprised in 3, 2, 1. Yay! Yes, amazing. Thank you, Julia. That was amazing. Okay, my final part of this presentation, everyone, before we get to the Q&A, is actually speaking. Like, what do we actually say versus in person and online? Speaking techniques. One of the tips I have for you is when you are in person, if it's a large group of people, you are going to speak a little more presentational. Even if you are on a microphone, you just need to get people in the back of the room engaged. Like I said, the gestures need to be bigger, the volume needs to be bigger too, if it's a bigger audience in person. Online, it's a little more conversational in style. If I was screaming at you guys into the microphone online, it would feel very awkward. So just make sure that it just sort of feels like a small group of people. That's sort of the volume you'd want to do for an online presentation. Okay. In person, there's more overlap in speaking, like my big Italian family, okay? So people are talking over each other. They're not waiting for someone to finish speaking before they jet in with their own opinion, okay? At least my family does that. I wonder if anyone else can relate to that. Anyways, in online, there's no overlap. We actually can't do that because two people cannot be speaking at the same time online. Zoom just sort of promotes one person, the loudest person, to speak. So wait for someone to stop speaking before you speak online. Verbal filler is obviously used so much more in person. The ums, the yeah, we can't do that online. So more facial expressions and reactions are needed online. In person, there's less follow-up, and online, we need more follow-up. You need to be checking in with people and make sure that they actually do understand, especially in a hybrid meeting. They recommend actually, if you are in person delivering a hybrid meeting, if you're go and check with those people online first if they understand. If there's any questions, go and check with those people online first. There might have been an internet connection problem that you're not even aware of because you're just focused on the people in the room. They're at a disadvantage, so give them the advantage of having the first opportunity to speak in a hybrid situation. Speakers pause more generally in person, and online speakers pause less. And so just be aware of that. Pauses are great. They allow people to jump in with their thoughts. They can unmute and they can say, oh, I actually just need some clarification there. But if you're not pausing in an online situation, people are just going to stay quiet, and then, it's just not going to be as easy to understand unless people can actually be interactive. Verbal active listening happens in person, the ums and the but online, no verbal active listening. So what we need to do is we need speakers to paraphrase, or if you are on the receiving end, you can paraphrase what the person just said. You can summarize what they said before saying your opinion. You can clarify what they said, or you clarify as the presenter, or reflect more. So these are all things that have to happen more online than in person. Okay, and concise speaking usually happens better in person because people can actually see that people understand. Online, especially if cameras are off, people get long-winded and they just tend to talk and talk and talk because they're not getting that feedback that actually people understand. Okay, one solution is to set a time limit for each speaker's response online. Okay, so that basically summarizes everything that I wanted to say in the content of it. But I don't expect you all to take everything that I talked about today and apply it right away. We talked about behavior differences, gesturing, eye contact, posture, facial expressions, or even just speaking tips like pausing. You're not going to get this all at the same time, but I do want you to have some self-awareness and see if you're actually doing some of these things and how it could be better based on the techniques that I've explained today. You can also watch other people in their presentations and see if they're applying some of these techniques too. It could have it been better? Maybe you apply that to your own presentation. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to ask Rupalin to come on back and we're going to be doing a Q&A.
Thank you so much, Joseph. One question that I have here is, and you touched on it briefly, in presentations, how do you recover from saying too many ums, likes, or even losing your train of thought in person or online? How do you recover from that?
Of course. Okay, one thing that I love, first I'll cover the losing your train of thought. There's a couple things that you can do. First is you can elaborate on what you just finished speaking about by telling a story or giving another example. And you're actually thinking about, what was I supposed to talk about next? So essentially you're instead of having like an awkward pause, you're actually kind of killing time until you remember what you were going to talk about next. The other option is to skip ahead to the next part of your presentation that you thought that you were going to that you were going to speak about, and then you can go back if you do remember what you forgot earlier. Okay, and then when it comes to the ums or the ahs, the verbal fillers, I am very acutely aware of my own. I say so much. I literally just used it right then. Being able to record yourself and listen to the recording, you'll be able to identify what are those filler words. Right. They come up so much. Essentially, fill it with pauses instead. Feel comfortable in the pauses. They're actually really useful. And I think we're afraid to pause. So instead of doing the filler words, just pause instead. I hope that answers the question. Oh, Rupalin, you're muted.
Thanks, Joseph. Next one here is, when do I put a poll in the presentation? What does timing look like for a poll?
Yeah, exactly. Asking the audience for questions that they actually need to respond to usually is best at the beginning of a topic. I love polls that really survey the audience to get a sense of if the audience really connects with the topic that I'm about to discuss or not. And then you get a sense of what to focus on in your presentation or not. One of the polls I considered for this presentation was asking how many screens people have right now. Do they have 3? Do you have 4? And that gives me a sense if I should elaborate on that multitasking setup, or should I just move on? If everyone's just all on one screen, then, I should just move on. Yeah, so getting to know your audience at the beginning of a presentation is so important, so you can choose whether to elaborate on something or to to not. Yeah.
Thanks, Joseph. You signal some ways to gauge boredom in the audience or meeting members. How do you mitigate the risk of your presentation being boring?
Absolutely. Actually, one other thing that I want to say about asking the audience questions is it is interactive. And so you don't just do it at the beginning of your presentation, but you can insert it throughout your presentation too. And that's one way also to combat boredom. There are whistles and tricks that you can do to keep people entertained through your presentation. And I applied some of those techniques today. Most of the interactive stuff that I did in my presentation, having you guys stand up, having you guys do funny facial expressions, happened at a point where I thought you guys were going to get a little bored of just seeing me talk or listening to me talk. So I do try to anticipate if there is a part of the presentation that is really just not that interesting, and ask people questions, and that's more interactive. You can also have more visual presentation aids too, like videos can explain it, have some pictures to explain it, graphs, these can help too. Yeah, anything that will get the audience moving or responding will keep people more engaged.
Thanks, Joseph. Two more questions here. The first one is how to avoid getting nervous while presenting during an interview. I would love to know some tips.
Oh, perfect question. Okay. When it comes to an interview, I think that you can go online and see common interview questions. And what I would do is do a mock interview with a partner or a friend, just so that you can essentially practice it, get that real life answers to those questions. I really do recommend that you treat it like it is the real interview when you are practicing it too. That will help it give you that kind of real life experience that will kind of let those anxieties go away. You can also practice your answers too. Most people will ask you things like, what are some challenges that you had in your previous role? Or they might ask you sort of, oh, what gets you excited about this position? Those are common questions that you have the opportunity in advance to tell a story about, and come with those examples in advance. So it's a combination of improvisation and a combination of preparedness. A lot of people just don't come in prepared, and that's something you actually can mitigate.
Thank you, Joseph. And one more here.
Perfect.
What would be your major presentation tip for a 2-on-1 video meeting with a potential client to make the environment more comfortable for them?
Okay, 2-on-1, meaning the presenter is speaking to two people?
Yeah, I'm assuming, well, maybe Aiden, you can correct us here, but I'm assuming that it would be two people on the one side presenting to one person on the receiving end.
Two people
Two
from
people from the company with one client. Thanks, Aiden.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, I would definitely pin the two people from the company so that they can be seen. And I imagine what's best, if it's an online meeting, then I would suggest just making sure you plan in advance who's going to be talking about what, just so that you have that all covered in advance, and especially in person as well too. It's always best to give the person the stage. So if you are in person, you can gently stand to the side and look at the person who is talking. That gives them the stage and gives them the spotlight, so to speak. And that's just the best way to not draw attention. We actually weirdly will look at the person not speaking if you're both standing up there at the same time, and you'll start to feel awkward because eyes are on you, and you'll start to fidget, and then you'll draw more attention to yourself. Essentially, stand to the side and look at the person who is speaking, and then swap back and forth.
Thank you, Joseph. I know that you have some words to say to close us off, but I just wanted to say to you, thank you so much for joining us for today and for such a fantastic presentation, and what valuable tips for, the world going back to normal, but also still maintaining that hybrid online, virtual and in-person space. So thank you again to you and to everybody who's joined us today. I'll hand it over to you to close up.
Thank you so much, Rupalin. So I would love to put together for you all a workshop in early 2023. The time and the date is actually going to be announced later, but here are some of the things that I would love to cover: fear of public speaking, advanced body language techniques, using the tone to communicate, adding variety in the voice to keep attention, which is actually one of the questions that we had earlier. Presentation aids, keep attention as well, speaking clearer, organizing your thoughts, especially if we're making a pitch, is all things I would love to cover in this workshop. So I would love to hear about what you thought of today. So please tell us how we did. I'm going to put a link to a Google form in the chat. And if you put your email at the end of that short 3-question survey, I will actually send you the slideshow from today, so you'll have that as a reference. I'll send that link in just 1 second. Sorry, 1 second.
And while Joseph's putting that link into the Google form, I just wanted to say, head on over to cpsa.com/events, where you will find Joseph's upcoming workshop to be announced in 2023 and all of our other virtual events there. Oh, thanks for slotting that in, Joseph. That's great.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. And finally, thank you so much, Rupalin and Ashley from the Canadian Professional Sales Association, for having me here today. I want you all to take these tools and think about how you can better communicate, either online, in person, or a hybrid. And also think about, if you have the choice, what would be better? If you can choose to have that online meeting, do it that way. If you can choose to have it in person, do it that way, wherever appropriate, and apply the techniques that I told you today. Thank you so much, everyone. Now get out there and nail it.
Thank you. Thanks, Joseph. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.